Right, we are turning our attention back to the news this week that Serena Williams has retired from professional tennis. Delighted to say that ex-professional tennis player and current coach Jenny Claffey is with us in studio. Jenny, how are you getting on?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's some disappointing news this week to hear the retirement of Serena Williams. Anyway, sad day for tennis.
But I was just going to ask, like, is your initial disappointment based on the fact that she won't get to the record now? Is it based on the fact that it's just the end of a great career, or what informs that disappointment?
I think it's an end of an era for tennis. You know, the Williams sisters, Serena Williams leaving the game, you know, what an iconic athlete she has been for the last 2 decades. You know, she has transcended the sport and impacted so many people across the world, and as her legacy will continue for generations to come. So I think based on that, it's very sad day for tennis, as I said, but then also for the game, missing that big star in the women's game is going to be a big loss.
How visible was that impact when you were coming through the professional ranks on what she had in the game? I'm not sure, does that come across stylistically or in other ways, but how did you measure that impact?
When I was growing up, when I was playing, she was a complete idol for me. You know, the way I based my game was on her style. Like her, she's such an athletic woman. I wanted to be that strong and powerful like her. Her strokes were so powerful. Her serve was really big. You know, I wanted to be just like her growing up, and you could see she was so dominant in the game. And kind of when she came onto the tour in the 90s, I was just a kid then, so I followed her progress the whole way through my playing career and always looked up to her. So, you know, she's just an incredible athlete and an amazing tennis player. What
defined her game?
Her on court,
yeah.
Her serve, I'd say, was the biggest factor in her game, closely led by her forehand, I'd say. But her serve was just so dominant in the game. And when they came onto the tour, as I said, they revolutionised the women's game. They brought this power, the Williams, they brought this power game style of tennis. With the serve, she revolutionised it with the fact that she was winning so many points with serve, you know, this unreturnable serve from oppositions. So she'd be banging down aces left, right and centre, you know, and the opponents could not get the ball back or could not get a read on her serve. So I think that was the starting factor then in her dominance, and then the forehand closely follows behind.
Yeah, it just seems that if you're trying to pick out any sort of weakness in the game at all, you'd struggle to find a single one, would you?
Yeah, I was saying her weaknesses, possibly, if you had to pick one, would have been maybe fitness and footwork, you know, but her anticipation skills were so good that she got away with her footwork not being maybe the best in the world. And maybe she struggled a little bit when she had injuries coming back to the game. Her fitness was a bit of an issue, and some players were able to exploit that, but not that many.
Thought it was nice as well hearing how she spoke about Venus and saying that if there was no Venus, there was no Serena, that the two of them really drove each other on.
Yeah, I think that was a massive factor in Serena's success. Like, there was a few environmental factors, and that definitely was one of them. The fact that Venus was the leader and she was in her shadows, and you could see when she was growing up that she always wanted to be better than Venus, so that drove her. And she admitted herself that she learned a lot from her mistakes and her losses, Venus, when she was playing on the tour. So she got to almost jump to the scene with all that experience as if she had played it herself. So she was a massive factor in her success.
And the fact that they're sisters, they're both powerhouses, I think it shed such a light on tennis for people that maybe never even watched the game before. You know, that you're like, wow, like these sisters doing this and they're the best at it. You know, I think at that point is when a lot of people paid attention to tennis that maybe hadn't really had a massive interest before.
Yeah, it's cool the fact that like these two sisters came along at the same time, pretty much. Like Venus joined the tour only a year before Serena, and then they completely changed the game and took over. For the past 2 decades, they have been dominating the tennis game. You know, I think Serena has 23 Grand Slams and Venus has 7. Like, that's 30 Grand Slams plus 16 in doubles together. You know, nearly 50 Grand Slams between them in the family. Like, what an amazing achievement.
So it also kind of like brings to like this interesting conversation where, you know, some sports people need a great rival. Like, say in the men's game, people are like, you know, it was only brilliant because you had Nadal to match your Federer and then Djokovic to a later extent. It doesn't seem like the women's game suffered all that much for there being an unrivaled superstar in the game. People were tuning in to watch one person.
Yeah, it's incredible that has happened, and it's probably something that we're never going to see again in the women's tennis game, like a star like that who can dominate for so long. But the two of them definitely, I think, drove each other on, and it was great to see this rival. But I always felt there was a kind of a level of awkwardness when they played each other, because the matches always seem to be quite subdued when they play each other in a Grand Slam final or in any big stage, because you know who was going to win. And in the beginning it was always Venus, and then once Serena beat her, I think she pretty much had the beating of her then, and she rose to that stardom and stayed at the top the whole time.
When you mentioned there a few minutes ago about her style and the power game that she brought to proceedings, what was the knock-on impact for a generation of tennis players? Like, was there a lot of imitators trying to do that exact thing? I know you allude to yourself there, or did it actually have kind of an extra knock-on impact where people were kind of preparing themselves to come up against that power game, and then they therefore had to come up with something new?
Yeah, as I mentioned, like, they revolutionised the game in terms of they brought that power game to the tour, whereas then the players had to adapt to that power style. So if you're going to try and beat somebody who plays with that amount of power, you either have to match them and be better than them at it, or you have to be an incredible defender. But if you're not defending well enough, they're just going to pick you apart. Like the Williams, they stay so close to the baseline, take time away from the opponent. It's very difficult to play against somebody who plays like that. But then that has then shaped the game for those past 2 decades. You know, everybody was playing that kind of aggressive game style. Like if you look at the likes of Maria Sharapova, she was a very aggressive player, just like Williams, but Williams is always that bit better than her at that. So you see now in recent days, in the last year or two, the likes of Iga Swiatek and Ons Jabeur, who play a different kind of game style because they've had to evolve their games to try to beat the likes of Williams. So initially the Williams brought this power game, and that's how the game was played for the last 20 years. And now we're seeing a different game style being brought. Like the women are much more diverse in how they play. They're able to play with power, they're able to defend well, they're able to play with drop shots and different types of spins coming into the net. So they've had to evolve the game to try to beat the Williams, which has made the game much more interesting now.
It's fascinating. So if I was to ask you 2017 Serena against the current peak player, say against Swiatek currently, how would that match go? Is it still Serena in dominant form, or has the intervening 5 years led to an evolution in the game where there would genuinely be a rival to Serena?
That would be a great matchup because they've never actually met each other, either of those players. Yeah, I think that would be a really interesting match to see, because you'd be seeing Swiatek throwing the kitchen sink at her, you know, trying everything against her to try and beat her. But Swiatek is one of those players who's an incredible defender, so she could actually maybe hold Serena back. But I think if we see Serena in full dominance, like, she would just wipe anyone off the court.
Yeah, the GOAT is the GOAT, really.
There's no denying.
It's probably hard to make a case for anybody else. Like, when you were coming through, did you think of playing Serena eventually? Was that part of like your ambitions? Like when you said that she inspired you, did you also think, geez, one day I could get on the same court as her? Yeah,
that was part of it. You know, I was thinking that because when I was coming to my peak in my professional career, it would have been a time that she was playing, so it would have been 2015, so she was still dominating the tour at that stage. So the thoughts were there at the back of my mind: if I'm going to win a Grand Slam, I'm going to have to beat Serena Williams.
Yeah. And how close did that ever come to happening, or to playing, or I should say?
Not close enough. Yeah. Not close enough.
How would you have got on?
We would have been very similar game styles. Like, as I said, my game was based around how she played, and I was a power player as well. But she might have had the edge, you know, maybe just had the edge.
And the way she announced her retirement, well, she doesn't like to say retirement. I thought that was quite interesting, the way she said it, that she's evolving outside of tennis. It was a really tough decision for her. She didn't want to have to make it. She feels like she almost had to make it. What did you make of all that side of things?
Yeah, the way that she announced retirement is quite interesting. I find the fact that she's using this term evolving, you know, it's obviously a very painful time for her to be leaving the sport behind. There's obviously a huge amount of passion still there, but there are other endeavours she obviously wants to pursue, including start having another child. And she alluded to that in her interview, that, you know, if she was a male tennis player, she would be able to continue playing, and her wife, if in that situation, would be able to have the family. So there's a bit of like a sting, I think, there for her, and I do think it's really disappointing for her that she feels she can't go on anymore. But I do think there are physical elements to that as well. You know, the fact that she's nearly 41 and her body, she's had a few injuries over the last while, so it's come at a right time, I think, in a way. But it's just a disappointing.
Yeah, she doesn't really mention those factors that you would think of her age and obviously your body over time. You know, it's just natural that's what's going to happen. But it's more the fact she wants to push on and have maybe a bigger family, have another child. That's really the main reasons, which just shows what unbelievable type of person she is, like athlete-wise, her mindset, like nothing can, phase her.
Yeah, she's an all-round incredible athlete. Like, you see off court, or individual as well. Off court, she has, she's an entrepreneur. She's done amazing things for women's rights and for Black American women. She's really been very strong with that as well. And then now she's kind of got that at that stage where she's ready to just move into that direction of kind of following Serena's ventures, I think, and starting and having a bigger family. So the day has come, unfortunately, that she's stepping away.
I think most people did want to see her get over the line in one of those, what was it, 4 finals that she got to over the last few years. But to what extent was actually getting to those finals as much of an achievement as some of the Grand Slams that she actually won?
Yeah, that's massive. Like, the last 4 Grand Slam finals she's gotten to have been on the back of having her first child, and she had a very traumatic pregnancy with her first child, and getting to 4 finals. I think everybody was gunning for her to win one more and match that Margaret Court 24 Grand Slams. I mean, it was heartbreaking to see she came so close to matching that 24th, elusive 24th Grand Slam, we'll say. But it's a massive achievement to get to there. Like, to get to any Grand Slam final once is a huge deal. And she said herself that, she feels like she could have won 30 plus Grand Slams, but she turned up 23 times and won 23 Grand Slams. So, obviously it's still a fantastic achievement to make 4 Grand Slams. It's just such a shame she didn't get over the line.
Is there any debate in tennis circles about who the greatest women's tennis player is of all time?
I think it's undeniably Serena Williams. I think the best tennis player in the world, let alone female tennis player, is definitely her. And
the Margaret Court thing just doesn't factor in at all?
It's hard to compare the different eras. Margaret Court won hers when it was not the professional era. So, there were less people travelling down to Australia, which is where she's from, and she won a lot of Grand Slams down there. So a lot of people weren't travelling to Australia to play a lot of the players. And then since then, the game has completely evolved in terms of technology and fitness and rackets, equipment. Everything has evolved since then. But it's very hard to compare the two. But I still think Williams is the GOAT.
Colin's got a question, wondering which player was able to consistently get the best out of Serena Williams, which is a good question.
Other than Venus Williams, I think Victoria Azarenka, she pushed her. She was a very similar game style to her as well, and Sharapova. I think the two of them probably were the two who kind of went toe to toe with her. I'm not picking one there. I think the two of them were probably the two closest rivals for her, who could have pushed her more and more.
Why was that?
Their games were quite similar to the way that she played. Maybe their fitness was a little bit better than her in times, because Sharapova won 7 Grand Slams as well. So she obviously had the game and to beat Williams, and has beaten Williams in finals as well. So I think they match up well, but over a longer period of time, consistently Williams was the better player.
Is this definitely it? We talk about the strange language around the retirement article, the retirement book that basically was, we printed it off. Are we sure that this is definitely going to be the last we see of her in a court?
Never say never.
Yeah, I think so. That's what I would think. Yeah. Just the way she worded it, I was like...
And how she is so passionate about tennis and winning and competing. It's going to be very hard for her to match that in her life outside of sport. So where is she going to get that where's that need going to be met? So maybe we might see a comeback.
Yeah, she's such a competitor, like a ferocious competitor. So she needs to fill that somehow.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be surprised if she did have another child, then you could maybe see her back
Give
again.
her 2 years maybe and she'll be back. But hopefully the US Open this year goes her way and she can match Margaret Court 24.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Wouldn't that just be a way to see her off?
Absolutely. Also as well, there's you presume a very full-on coach in her future down the line as well, if she wanted that, because I'm sure that the competitive jug needs to be obtained from somewhere after she does. I
don't think a coach though would be enough for her. She'd want to be out there playing herself, because nothing beats that feeling of when you're out on a match court and the nerves in your tummy and the excitement and the crowd. You wouldn't get that as a coach. It's just not the same.
She has her little girl out on the court a little bit with her, so you never know, there could be another.
But she did say in her interview that she wouldn't necessarily pick tennis for her daughter. But whatever she wants to do, she's put her in it. So it's interesting that she doesn't necessarily want to push her into tennis.
Yeah.
I feel the same as well, actually. I wouldn't.
Oh, really?
Don't think I would.
Why do you think that?
It's just a very tough sport, like an individual sport, and you have to have the personality or to be that driven and individual and selfish to pursue an individual sport. Whereas I just think it's a very tricky lifestyle, and the path to it is very difficult. And I just think I'd have them team sports first, and then maybe switch to golf because you'll make more money that way.
It does seem tennis is particularly taxing on the mind, like as far as all individual sports are, but it feels like the stories we hear from tennis are particularly grim at times in terms of what the lengths you need to go to actually make it.
Yeah, it's a really tough sport. There's no denying that, let alone the fact that it's an individual sport. There's just so much involved in it. Like, obviously it's all encompassing. Your life becomes the sport. But it's one of those sports that you win, you have a big win today, and then you get to enjoy it for about 10 minutes, and then you're back on because you've got to face another opposition the next day. So it's a very short celebratory period and a very long loss. Like, when you lose, you suffer it much more than you enjoy the winning, because there's always the next day and the next opposition. It's very back to back. That's what I found really tricky when I played on the tour, was that you win, you come off this and you're elated, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I need to prepare for tomorrow, and then they come down. So there's lots of highs and lows in the game, and there seems to be obviously now a lot of injuries which are impacting a lot of players. You hear the how difficult that is, and how you just all of a sudden you're at the top of your game, you get injured, and then you drop off. That's happened to a number of players, and they never regain the same level that they did before. It's a very difficult sport, soul destroying at times.
Yeah.
Can it be a lonely sport at times?
I didn't even mention that, but that is one of the hardest things as well. Is like, you're initially, like when I started my career, for example, I was traveling alone. You couldn't afford to have a coach. You couldn't afford to have anyone there with you. I went to a foreign country, didn't speak the language, didn't know anybody, and it's like, where do I go from here? And then, as I said, if you lose, it's even worse. Then you're on the phone to people. It's not the same. You're at dinner on your own. It's just really quite a lonely place to be when you lose, especially. When you win, you can deal with it a bit better. But yeah, it's a lonely, tough sport. Yeah. Not to put people off the game, though. It's brought me so much happy memories as well.
Yeah, of course. I think that's probably a pretty good prediction that Serena may not be pushing her kids into the sport too much, unless they could well be just gifted like her as well, and it could be a natural conclusion. Listen, Jenny, great stuff, great insight. Thanks very much for joining us in studio this morning.
Thanks, guys.